I separated, and I'm now with Linda Kozlowski, and that's the sort of full story. How, when, where, why, and all these sort of intimate details. No one needs to know anything.
In the quiet twilight of a life lived large, some truths just seem to find their way to the surface. For Paul Hogan, the man who charmed the entire world as the rugged, knife-wielding adventurer Crocodile Dundee, his story was always one of fame, fortune, and global adoration. But now, at 85 years old, a look back at his life and his own words reveals a stunning picture of the one that got away. It was never about the box office numbers or the Hollywood awards. It was about a love that defined his lifetime. It's a love story that started under the Australian sun and ended in the quiet solitude of a Los Angeles mansion. This is the real, heartbreaking story behind Paul Hogan and his Crocodile Dundee co-star, Linda Kozlowski. Decades after their famous romance kicked off on the set of Crocodile Dundee, a deeper and more heartbreaking truth about their relationship has come into focus. At 85, the man the world knew as the charismatic adventurer has, through years of candid reflections, painted a picture of a love that defined his life, even long after their surprising and public split. It's a tale of how perfect on screen, chemistry blossomed into a real-life fairy tale, only to crumble under the immense pressure of fame and the silent erosion of two people simply growing apart. And at the heart of it all is a man looking back, grappling with the one loss he could never just deflect with a joke or a shrug. Before Mick Crocodile Dundee was a household name, Paul Hogan was the perfect example of an Australian success story. He was a self-made man with a quick wit and an anti-authority charm that people loved. Born in a Sydney suburb, he wasn't some product of the outback he'd later represent. He actually worked as a rigger on the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge. His break into show business was basically on a dare. In 1971, he and his workmates were watching an amateur talent show and criticizing the judges. Convinced he could do better, Hogan went on the show himself, claiming to be a tap-dancing knife thrower. Instead, he delivered a comedy routine that just roasted the judges. It was a massive hit. That single stunt launched a career that led to The Paul Hogan Show, a sketch comedy series that ran for over a decade and made him a national icon. By the early 80s, Hogan was already a married man with a big family. He'd married Noeline Edwards back in 1958 when he was just 19, and by 22, he was a father of 3. They eventually had 5 kids together, building a life far away from the glitz of Hollywood. Their relationship was a long and complicated one. They divorced in 1981, only to get remarried less than a year later. But Hogan was ambitious and had his sights set beyond Australia. He was convinced he could create Australia's first real international blockbuster. That idea, born from his own feeling of being a fish out of water on a trip to New York, became Crocodile Dundee. Meanwhile, across the globe, a young American actress named Linda Kozlowski was trying to make it in Hollywood. She was a graduate of the prestigious Juilliard School, a serious, trained actress who had paid her dues in off-Broadway shows and even had a role in the 1985 film version of Death of a Salesman. She was talented, beautiful, and just waiting for that one role that would change everything. That role was Sue Charlton, a sharp American journalist sent to the Australian outback to profile a legendary croc hunter. The casting for Crocodile Dundee was pure fate. When Linda Kozlowski was cast, nobody could have known that their on-screen chemistry would become the most powerful part of the film, and ultimately, their lives. From the moment they met on set in the vast, wild Kakadu National Park, something was just different. The connection was immediate and undeniable. Those on set later recalled that the romance seemed unstoppable. Kozlowski herself was worried, knowing Hogan was a married man, but the pull was just too strong. Hogan later admitted, "I knew I was in trouble from the moment I laid eyes on her." The affection they showed each other between takes made it clear to everyone that this was more than just acting. Crocodile Dundee, released in 1986, became a global sensation against all odds. The world fell in love with the easygoing Aussie hero and the sophisticated American journalist who fell for him. But as audiences were celebrating the fictional romance, a real one was causing a storm behind the scenes. Hogan's marriage to Noeline, which was already strained, couldn't survive this new, powerful love. The divorce that followed in 1990 was painful and public, marking a huge turning point in Hogan's life. In May 1990, right after his divorce was finalized, Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski got married. It seemed like the perfect Hollywood ending. They were Hollywood's new golden couple, and for a while their life together looked just as idyllic as the fantasy that brought them together. The world watched, convinced they were seeing a true love story for the ages. The early years of their marriage were a whirlwind of success. They made Crocodile Dundee 2 in 1988 and starred together again in Almost an Angel in 1990. Their public image was one of relaxed glamour and real affection. They tried living in Australia, but the intense media attention was too much, so they eventually moved to Los Angeles, seeking a bit of privacy. In 1998, their family was complete with the birth of their son, Chance. Hogan was 59, and he poured all his energy into being a father. From the outside, it looked like they had it all: a huge mansion, incredible wealth from the Dundee franchise, and a wonderful son. Hogan had smartly kept most of the profits from the films, making him an incredibly wealthy man, and Linda had a Golden Globe nomination for her role. But under the glossy surface of their seemingly perfect life, cracks were starting to show. One of the biggest pressures was the very thing that brought them together: the shadow of Crocodile Dundee. Paul Hogan became so tied to the character that it was hard for anyone, maybe even himself, to tell the man from the myth. This incredible fame was also a cage. Hogan, a man who really valued his privacy, was now always in the spotlight. He started to pull back from the Hollywood machine he felt was trying to exploit him. This retreat had a huge impact on Linda. As a Juilliard-trained actress with her own ambitions, she saw her career opportunities start to dry up. She took a few roles in the 90s, but they were mostly forgettable films that left her feeling deeply unsatisfied. She spoke openly about her frustration, saying the schlocky films were giving her an ulcer because she was often the only one on set who cared about quality. On top of her career frustrations, she felt like she was losing her own identity. She wasn't Linda Kozlowski, the actress, anymore. She was Mrs. Paul Hogan. It's been reported that Linda felt like she was living someone else's life, not her own. She'd stepped back from acting to raise Chance, a choice she made willingly, but it left her feeling trapped. She wanted to get back to her career, but her ambitions clashed with Hogan's more traditional views. This basic difference in what they wanted out of life created a huge divide. The very things that once attracted them, his rugged simplicity and her sophisticated ambition, were now causing conflict. Hogan himself later admitted they were opposites in just about everything. For 20 years, that attraction was enough, but over time, their lack of common ground became a massive gap between them. In public photos from their later years, the easy intimacy was gone, replaced by a subtle distance. Linda reportedly felt trapped in a gilded cage, with all the material comforts in the world but having lost herself in the process. Their paradise was proving to be a lonely place, and the love story that had enchanted the world was slowly coming to an end. In 2013, the news broke. Linda Kozlowski had filed for divorce from Paul Hogan, citing irreconcilable differences. To the public, it was a huge shock. They had been married for 23 years, which is a lifetime by Hollywood standards. The split was officially called amicable. Linda told the press they had simply and naturally grown apart. One of our problems was we really had nothing in common, and over time, that happens to a lot of people, she explained, adding that they were still friendly and talked on the phone. The divorce settlement seemed to back this up. Linda received a one-time payment of $625 million, and they agreed she could keep living in their Venice beach house. Paul Hogan kept the rights to the Crocodile Dundee character. There were no messy court battles or public fights. It looked like a very mature end to a long relationship. But behind this civilized front was a story of deep sadness. For Hogan, then 74, the end of his marriage was a devastating blow. People close to him said he was truly heartbroken. The loss of his partner of over 2 decades left a void that fame and money couldn't fill. Their paths went in completely different directions after the divorce. Linda, free from the shadow of her famous ex, went on a journey of rediscovery. That journey took her all the way to Morocco. There, she found peace and a new love with her business partner, a tour guide named Moulay Hafid Baba. She was no longer Mrs. Hogan. She was Linda Kozlowski again, an independent woman who found happiness on her own terms, a world away from Hollywood. Paul Hogan's life, by contrast, became much more solitary. He stayed in his Venice, California home, living a quiet life. He faced health challenges, including muscle atrophy and chronic pain, that left him looking frail in public. Though he kept his classic sense of humor, there was an undeniable feeling of loneliness. He confessed in one interview that despite all his success, he felt empty without Linda. Friends have said he never really opened his heart to anyone else after she left. The one thing that still connects them is their son, Chance. They're shared. Concern for him has brought them together as a family on different occasions. Hogan has said his son is his top priority and the main reason he stays in the United States, even though he longs to return to his native Australia. This modern family dynamic shows a continued, if complicated, bond centered on their love for their child. The end of their marriage wasn't one big dramatic event, but the quiet result of years of growing apart. Linda wanted freedom and a life of her own, and she found it. Paul was left to deal with the silence, a man surrounded by the ghosts of his past success. In the years since the divorce, Paul Hogan has become much more reflective. Now at 85, facing his own mortality and health issues, the tough guy act of Mick Dundee has softened, revealing the vulnerability of a man looking back on a life of incredible highs and deep lows. And in these quiet moments of reflection, one name keeps coming up, Linda. He has talked about their marriage with a new kind of honesty, admitting his own faults. "I'm not a great husband, I'm good early," he once admitted in a moment of stark self-assessment. But his most powerful comments have been about the depth of his feelings for Linda, feelings that divorce couldn't just erase. While there's been no single recent confession, his words over the years have led many to believe that he still considers her the great love of his life. In one emotionally raw interview, he seemed to lay bare the weight of his regret. It speaks to a love that wasn't destroyed by fighting or betrayal, but one that just wore away under the weight of 2 different dreams and the pressure of a public life. Hogan himself described their marriage as 20 wonderful years and 2 or 3 that were sort of like worn out. That simple summary perfectly captures the slow, sad decline of their great love affair. His loneliness has become a recurring theme. The man who could capture the attention of millions now talks about having too much time on his hands. This confession of isolation has shown fans the man behind the myth, a man who paid a heavy price for a level of success most people can only dream of. His final wish, to have his ashes scattered over the Sydney Harbor Bridge where his amazing journey began, is a poignant, full-circle moment for a man thinking about his roots and his legacy. Their story will always be tied to Crocodile Dundee. The film that made them a couple also, in some ways, planted the seeds of their separation. The movie's enduring popularity ensures that their on-screen love story will be celebrated forever. But for Hogan, the reality is far more complicated. He's left with the lifelong echo of a love that was real, a love that defined him, and a love That, a decade after a divorce, has clearly never left him. At 85, Paul Hogan, the legendary adventurer, is facing his greatest challenge: a life without the woman he still seems to consider the love of his life. The love story of Paul Hogan and Linda Kozlowski is a powerful story about the pressures of fame and the quiet heartbreak of two people who loved each other but couldn't walk the same path. It started like a fairy tale, with an electric chemistry that lit up the screen and the entire world. For 2 decades, they were the real-life version of their movie romance. But the very things that brought them together, the iconic roles and global fame, eventually drove them apart. Today, Linda has found a new life and a new sense of self, far from the Hollywood that once defined her. Paul Hogan, in his later years, lives with the memories and the regrets. A look back at his life story makes it clear that Linda was and remains a defining force. It shows that some love stories don't really end. They just become a part of who we are, a lifelong echo in the quiet moments. The man who taught the world how to smile in the face of danger has shown us the profound sadness of a love that was lost but never forgotten. What do you think about this iconic Hollywood romance? Do you think fame was the reason their relationship was doomed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by the untold stories of Hollywood's greatest stars, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives and loves that defined an era.